Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you for your patience as we set all of this up. It's always the devil in the details, right? You should now be looking at my screen, which is the starting slide. Um, if anyone's having trouble seeing that, just let us know. This is, gosh, the fourth series of our seminars or webinars for this year. We intend to continue these at once a month to provide some information to the community, to engage, to support, to get feedback on everything that we and others and partners are doing in the community. The I will my name's Tom Litwicki, and I serve as CEO for OPCS. It's a great privilege to be here and be with the organization. I've been here quite a number of years, and very grateful for the opportunity to serve in this sort of a function in the community. It's a great honor. Today, we're going to talk about low barrier shelter and our first congregate low barrier shelter in Tucson, Arizona, and get some panelists and some feedback and all that good stuff. So without further ado, I'll start. See how I do this. Very first is thank yous. Can't forget the thank yous, right? So first of all, the City of Tucson Housing and Community Development. This is a partnership between the City of Tucson, OPCS, Amphi Neighborhood, and the Arizona Department of Housing. And the City of Tucson has graciously provided the building in the retired firehouse and the improvements to that structure and everything that's needed there. The Arizona Department of Housing is the founder of the feast, as you might call. They have provided all of the funding for the services that OPCS is able to provide at this location and another shelter that is for families. And then the Amphi Neighborhood, who we had numerous meetings with, who has graciously allowed us into their neighborhood and welcomed us, and who we hope to be good partners and stewards of their fine neighborhood. So can't say enough thanks. Sometimes if you're like me, sometimes I forget the thank yous in life. And so it's always nice to come back and say, hey, we wouldn't be here if it wasn't for these partners and these leaders who are making this happen. I also want to kind of give an overview of what we're going to do today, sort of quickly. We're going to first give a virtual tour. We really believe, and I firmly believe, that the community has a right to see the housing and services and shelter that's provided. All of our work is funded through government and donors. So having that availability and access, I think, is important. And so one of the ways we're going to do that today is to do a virtual tour. And it's a little risky in some ways because you never know how a live virtual tour is going to go. But I got to tell you, we like to take risks. So it's going to be amazing. Um, and then there'll be a panel and time for questions from the audience. I also have a couple of questions I may ask. And our panel today, we are extremely fortunate to have two people that I've known for many years and am humbled by their dedication to this work and their kindness and compassion and just their willingness. You got to be tenacious in this work, and their willingness to go home tired and then come back the next day and try it again. And that's Deidre, who's serving as our OPCS shelter director. And oh gosh, all the other, what is it? What do they call it? Other duties is assigned, and all the other areas that you're covering. Deidre's been with us many years, started out as a case manager. She knows how things work from the inside and out, and is just an amazing leader in our organization. And then Allison, and Allison is currently serving as the interim director of the City of Tucson's Housing First program. And Allison, I used to work with at OPCS and was so amazing at her work and quite the leader in our organization that, of course, the city did what they do in government. I used to work in government. They recruited her to the city of Tucson. And although we lost her at OPCS, we gained a strategic partner in the community. So that's a wonderful thing. And so these folks will be available for questions. Deidre will be leading our tour when we get that started. And then in the beginning, I'm going to provide some kind of basic information for the first 10 minutes or so on what low barrier shelter is. So first and foremost, I just want to, I put these together last night. I don't know about you, but I'm a last minute. In fact, I was making a couple changes to these slides 10 minutes ago. I'm a last minute kind of guy, inspirational sort of. And last night I changed the entire slideshow, of course, right? Um, and I wanted to back up a bit and say, because we can talk about the nuts and bolts of low barrier shelter, which is important, but there's also this bigger why, like why low barrier shelter. And for OPCS and I think others that are doing low barrier shelter, it's really about acceptance and empathy and compassion. So we're not judging people. We're trying to say, you know what, we want to get empathy and to get compassion, you have to understand people. So we want to understand this situation. We don't want to blame you for the situation that you're in. We want to understand. And as we understand, we want to learn from you and we want to be able to express our compassion for you by offering solutions that are actually going to be beneficial, that you actually need, not something we thought you needed, but you actually need. Um, the other thing is that low barrier shelter, from my perspective, is an ethical and professional response to persons afflicted with addiction, mental illness, and poverty. So again, instead of going out and saying you need to be this way or that way, it's a reasonable response to say, no, we're going to provide supports and services based on the conditions and needs that you have today, just as you would in any hospital or behavioral health clinic, that it first comes from, we're here to serve you as a public servant, and we want to figure out what it is from you that you actually need, and then try and design services around that. And that really is the ethical and professional way to develop any kind of services for the public. Um, and then it's a true act of kindness and love for others who are less fortunate. It's very hard, I think, sometimes to be in a community and to see people who are in such dire conditions and not be able to know what it is I can do to help. And so we're very fortunate to be in a position to know and then to hopefully share with others on how maybe they can be involved in that. Um, the other one is that it's a way to reduce the negative impacts of unsheltered homelessness within our community, while reducing the suffering and premature death of those experiencing homelessness. Someone will most likely die unsheltered today. Over 360 people die every year homeless in our community. By the end of this week, most likely a veteran will die homeless on the streets. So we may not see it every day, but people are literally dying prematurely from this situation on the streets. And when we think of them as being our grandparent, our aunt or uncle, our child, that really changes and frames the conversation. The other thing is that the current state of unsheltered homelessness in our community does have a negative impact on our public spaces, and it has a negative impact on business and other community activities. And it's not fair for us to potentially say, oh, tough. That's, something you just have to deal with. No, we all want the same thing. We all want a positive, healthy community where we can share public spaces safely and positively. And so really, low barrier shelter is about helping the people who are in most need, who are also the people who are most likely in those public places, in front of businesses, potentially having negative impacts on the community and experiencing this really significant suffering that they're having as an unsheltered person in our community. Um, so role of low barrier shelters in ending homelessness. Um, Essentially, that's pretty straightforward. So the low barrier shelter system or process is one solution within a larger system. And I just wanted to mention, the goal in low barrier shelter is to serve those who have the highest need. So it really has to have a high connection to street outreach and into the unsheltered community. From low barrier shelter, also, there needs to be this pathway into housing. Now, I also mentioned, you'll notice there's a little orange arrow that goes directly from street outreach and unsheltered into a home, into a leased unit. That is possible. In many ways, that's preferable, and it can be done, and people do quite well in that path. The problem is that we don't have enough affordable housing at the moment, and you can't get people in fast enough. And so to keep people from perishing on the streets and to help the process go quicker and easier, a low barrier shelter is a good intervention to have that middle ground so that people can essentially stay alive while they're moving their way into permanent housing. When you get into low barrier shelter, now this is a little bit more of the nuts and bolts, right? So it's really about how do we prevent harm that could be associated with being unsheltered. So that's what I was just talking about earlier. People who are dying through overdose, people who are victims of assault, folks who are in mental health crisis. So you're trying to really prevent the harm associated with unsheltered homelessness. The second sort of goal, once you've done that, is that we want to help people rapidly get into stable housing solutions. So that's why we have case management and support services that guide people into supportive housing. And I'll be able to provide you some numbers at the end of this that you can see this kind of initial shelter, what that looks like and how that's working. And then you want to promote wellness and you want to help people get relief from poverty. So that's usually about services and supports and community and belonging. And that's usually about access to employment and income, and for some folks, disability, so that you can survive on your own in your own home and with dignity. The other, you'll notice I put in here, services are optional for guests, but not optional for staff. It's something I heard at a shelter once, and I think a lot of times low barrier shelter, housing first, these models, there's some assumption that they don't have services attached. That could be anything farthest from the truth. I get sometimes with OPCS, people will say, Tom, have you guys ever thought of doing like services and behavioral health? Well, frankly, we have two outpatient clinics. We provide intensive outpatient treatment services. We have employment coaching. We have work programs. We provide a wide range of services. We just don't make it a requirement for someone to get the basic needs that they have. And what we find is that if people are able to meet their basic needs, then they are going, and you walk along with them, they are very likely and probable and predictable that they will engage in services. And I'll show you some of the outcomes in that area also. But staff are always seeking opportunities to engage people in services that would help them. One of the statements that I think if, filling your shelter with those that need it the most, not those that got there first or can comply with rules. So it's about filling that shelter with people who need it the most. And to do that, then there has to be a connection between your outreach and your shelter. It doesn't do you any good to have outreach workers who are not able to get people into shelter beds. That's why when we set this up, we intentionally years ago made it so that Deidre is over not only shelter beds, but also over outreach workers. So when the outreach worker is working with someone who they've been trying to get into housing for months, and they're willing that day to go to shelter, and they're high on the list and high need, we can get them into the shelter that day. So it's really critical that these systems connect and that that it's a seamless experience and they connect in a way that the client doesn't even know they're different departments or different areas. There are some theoretical foundations that I'll quickly mention so that people can kind of, for those of you who are into the science of it, we're always looking. It isn't about what OPCS believes or what we think. It's about what's the science. And these two models, there are others, but these two are kind of the primary models that explain the low barrier shelter system. Um, One is Maslow's hierarchy of needs. Pretty straightforward. For a long time, we expected people to get well and then get shelter, or get well before they come into shelter, or get, so we expected that, and that made a lot of sense for the operations of shelter, right? It made shelter operations easier, but it didn't get the people who needed it the most. So the people who really couldn't resolve their homelessness some other way were unable to get into shelter and perished on the streets, while those more able and more capable were able to get into the shelter. Now, that's not necessarily bad for those people. Everyone needs shelter. It just wasn't reaching the people, it wasn't triaging to reach the people who were dying in the streets. And so we had basically in our systems, we had Maslow's hierarchy of needs upside down. And so a low barrier shelter recognizes that people first need physiological needs met, water, warmth, shelter, rest, and then they need safety needs, security and safety. And when they have those two met, you can then start to move up into belongingness, esteem, and the ultimate self-actualization. Who am I in this world? Why am I here? What's my purpose? What's my legacy? How do I connect with others? All these really important elements. But if you're worried about whether you're going to survive through the night, it's really hard to move up to those higher levels. So what a low barrier shelter does is it provides a safe place for someone to come in, get off the streets, and deal with that crisis. And then once they've dealt with that, my experience has been these other needs start to show up. And people, we always encourage, but people actually become quite interested in bettering themselves once they have those basic needs met. But very hard to convince someone that they should do something about employment or other things or housing when they don't know how they're going to survive through the day. Or to suggest that maybe you should give up your addiction to a drug or substance when you don't know how you're going to survive the day. That's a really hard thing to do first. Those are the things you typically do second. But our systems require them to do first. So the other one is harm reduction. And I really wanted to bring up harm reduction today in a very normalized way. If you look at harm reduction online, you'll see a lot about managing addiction, managing substance dependence, but you won't see a lot about it as a typical medical intervention. And harm reduction is the primary medical intervention that is used by every primary care doctor in the community. It's nothing new. It's nothing special to addiction. So when we talk about harm reduction when people are experiencing homelessness, that's often things like providing naloxone to try and reverse overdose and to keep people from dying. Education on safe needle practices. Some places might do needle exchange. These are harm reduction. But the other things that are harm reduction that are quite common in our community are things like the reduction of smoking by replacing smoking with nicotine patches. Because the nicotine patch, although it's not necessarily good for you, right? It's not a health food, but it's better than smoking. It's better than having all of those chemicals and smoke within your lungs. It's better than that. And it's a step in the right direction. The other one is regular primary care screenings and checkups. Your doctor probably has, well, I'll tell you, my doctor certainly does, some health goals for me that I have not exactly fulfilled yet. But she still sees me every year and she still checks my blood levels and things every 6 months, even if I'm not necessarily following, because she knows that's a way to reduce harm. If she was just to cut me off and say, you know what, tough, Tom, you're not willing to change your diet, we're not going to give you your medications, right? She knows that would result in a higher likelihood of death. So she's going to keep engaging me, even though I haven't done everything that I need to live a healthier lifestyle. And then a real common one is condoms that help prevent the spread of disease. You might think that someone's having risky sexual behavior, but if their behavior isn't changing immediately, then having something that protects them from disease makes perfect sense. One of the first things I always heard when I was started in counseling from one of my mentors was the goal of the first session is always to have the second session. You can't work with someone who's not here for the second session and the third session. So it's about how do you keep people alive long enough so that they can then get recovery. It's not about perfection today. I will mention a couple of outcomes and then pass it over to our tour. So, we're fairly new. We've been at this for about a year. We've been in 2 locations, which has been a challenge. We were at the Econo Lodge for a while. Now we're at a retired fire station on King Road. And the team has been fantastic, and the city and everyone in the state at understanding the challenges you might have in opening a congregate low barrier shelter. Um, but so far, right now, today, we have 50 congregate beds, which I'm proud to say are at 89% occupancy. They have been at over 90% occupancy, which is our goal. And there's been some construction in the building, so that's changed that a bit. But now that that's ending, we should be right back where we want to be. We've had 213 folks come into our shelter since it was opened. And it's been, I think, close to a year now that we've been operating since we opened the Econo Lodge one. Our average stay in the congregate shelter has been about 29 days. It's more like 80 some days for our other shelter. I will briefly mention we have another program called Casa Amparo, also funded by the state of Arizona, initial funding, and that's for families. So when we get people coming into this shelter that really are with a partner or family, we don't want that separate, right? No one wants that. So we also have apartments at another location, which is also all part of this, and that's usually 80 some days. The number of people who've moved into permanent housing from here are 43%. We usually get somewhere between 45 and 50% of the people move into a permanent destination. I think sometimes people are surprised by that because we are working with folks who have a lot of things going on. And what this demonstrates is that fairly quickly, people can get the support they need if they have some place to call home for a short period of time that's safe, and supportive. We've done over 150 behavioral health assessments, over 1,000, so it's been 1,647 hours of case management as of today. So lots of support happening at the shelter. And we have the homeless work program, which provides a avenue for folks to be able to get cash employment income on a daily basis and improve and support the neighborhood in the local areas by picking up trash and weeds and other things within that neighborhood. So far it's been a great success. I will tell you it's not surprising because the research and the evidence says this is the success we should be having. Now, so that's kind of the overview, what we do and who we are. Now comes the real fun, which is Deidre and the actual tour that is going to happen within the facility. So let me see here. I need to stop my sharing and let them share. Oh, and look at Jacob's phone there.
We're starting.
Yep, here we are.
Hi, everybody. I'm Deidre. I was just gonna take you through like a tour of kind of like what the process is when people come in. Let you take a look around, talk about some of the services that we provide here. So let's get started, right?
All right.
So basically when folks come in, they come in through our outreach department. They come in, they get an orientation done, and then they get transported to our park location to get an intake completed. And then a BHA gets scheduled. So their first people that they usually see are our shelter monitors. This is all of our intake bags. This is Aiden. He's one of our shelter monitors. Philip, he's one of our shelter monitors. They go over like all the expectations. We try not to call them rules. And then they go through like our shower process. We offer them beverages, food when they're here. We have quite a big day room. Um, so they're just finishing lunch right now, sorry. Um, but all of our food is our dinner meals are prepped through, right now it's Carrot Ads. And then we have a coffee bar in the morning, breakfast, and then a lunch menu as well. So all their food is provided here. They come in here and spend time, they watch a little bit of TV. Yeah, so day room. Kitchen. Putting me in the camera. I'm gonna take you back to where the case managers meet with their folks when they come over here. So that would be in this office. Hi, Monica. Hello. We can go through the back here. We do have, so this is our food storage, our dry food storage. And then this office is where we have El Rio in here 3 times a week, 2 times for medical and 1 time for behavioral health services. Just cubbies where they can meet with folks. Our supplies for the shelter, like our cleaning supplies. This is our up because Monica and Gabby were like, we need misters out here. So we'll get this put up and I'm going to take you out back. It might be a little bit loud because we have generators going out there, but when you see it, you'll know why. So 1%. So our recycle bins are for excess storage. We do have clients that are planting. They're planting. This is our little puppy area. The clients got together and put a pool out here so that their little dogs could run and do whatever. I see clients leaving. I don't think they want to be in it. So we also have storage containers. We store things like kits for when people move out that we're able to purchase so that they can have furniture and a bed. Our shower trailers, our bathroom trailers are all ran by generator. We're currently, I currently got a bid because we're going to try to run electricity to them so we can keep the noise down and we can run them all the time. What else? What else out here? Well, we can go to the bay. So I'm just going to take you through the male bay, and then we can go through the female bay. So this bay houses 30 males. They do a pretty good job. Okay. Right. You feel more comfortable right now? Okay, so while I have him here, I was just going to introduce Kadeem. So he's one of our residents here. He was going to share just a little bit about where he came from and give a little testimonial about what he likes about this place and what he doesn't like about this place.
All right, I'll start with just simply not being from Tucson, Arizona. I am from Cleveland, Ohio. I arrived here December of 2022. And from then I have been dealing with a lot of homelessness and a lot of, I guess, like room renting and couch surfing and stuff like that. So eventually I met a young lady named Anastasia, which ultimately she referred me to Brian, which led me to OPCS. And I think it was April 21st, my intake day. And ever since then, the ball's been rolling. Everyone here, Miss D, Miss Elizabeth, and Joshua has been very helpful in helping me out and getting some things taken care of in regards to my license, job opportunities and career. And so it's been 3 months total just about, and I'm pretty happy with what's been going on with me and other clients that's here. I've been able to use my experiences with the staff to also help other clients get their things taken care of as well. I probably would say or suggest maybe incorporating a life skills program where there are daily, weekly, and monthly tasks for all of us, so that all of us are sort of keeping a discipline and structure in our lives. So once we do transfer out and leave here, that we'll be able to carry that over into our personal lives.
Thank you.
That's good.
That's good. You're
Okay.
good. Yeah, good, good. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
This is our female bay. It houses 20 right now. And I mean, as you can see, we're pretty full. I think we have 2 top bunks. We don't have any beds except for those 2. So we stay pretty full. Both bays have access doors where they can go out to the back. And smoke or do whatever they want to do. We have smoking areas set up. We had to take the awnings down because of the storm. So yeah, that's about it for the tour, I think.
Anything else?
I think so.
All righty.
All right. Thank you very much. We appreciate that. Yeah. Big round of applause. Yeah. There's all kinds of little emoji kind of things you can put up. Well, that went really well. That was amazing. Thank you very much. You know, when I see you do that, Dee, I recognize and I realize that, you know, you got a long day ahead of you and you got a lot of things to try and make things work. So giving us the time to do this, I think is really important for our community. But I also really appreciate it. I know you got other things that you need to do too. So thank you very much. Very grateful for your time. Next, we've got Allison and Dee once she gets resettled, but for some, you know, kind of question and answer and kind of get a sense of what it is they're doing. You kind of saw what Deidre's doing right now. So I guess this is the moment that we put Allison on spot to tell you what she's doing and what kind of collaboration she and the city has with this shelter operation.
Hi, everybody. So, as Tom said, I used to work at Old Pueblo, so I'm very fond of all the folks over there. The City of Tucson has collaborated with Old Pueblo well before I started working at Old Pueblo. My first venture into the collaboration between the City of Tucson and OPCS was during COVID when we ran the Viscount as a shelter, and that was kind of very it just kind of showed the support and the collaboration between the 2 entities, right? And so I was very excited when we had discussed opening the fire station and when we found out Old Pueblo had agreed to operate it. But yeah, like Tom said, it's a complete collaboration. Dee and I talk probably at least once a day, if not more. You know, and it's a dual-sided collaboration. Anything Dee needs, I'm happy to support. She sometimes needs me to send staff over and help her out over there. Maintenance issues, maintenance questions, we're happy to jump in and help out however we can. And then, but that also works on the other end. If Dee needs a favor, needs me to help her out in some way, I'm happy to respond. She's happy to respond. And I think that's kind of what makes it work. For those of you that work in this field, we all know we cannot do this by ourselves. We have to have other partners and collaborators that we can count on and work with. And I just really, I appreciate everything you guys are doing over there. It's so amazing. I'll let Dee speak on a little bit of the collaboration with TPD that you guys have there when she hops on. I know we wanted to touch on that.
Yeah, I don't see D yet.
I'm on
Oh,
here.
there you
There
are.
she
You're right
is.
there. Never
Yeah.
mind. Sorry.
I had to run back to my computer. So.
Yeah, right.
So yeah, so like Allison was saying, we set up an actual after hours drop off for TPD, and it's been going very well. So they have a specified phone for the monitors. They call, find out if there's a bed available, drop off. We do a very minimal, what we absolutely have to have for orientation, because usually it's in the middle of the night. And then the folks meet with their staff members the next day to get settled and get intakes completed. I also did want to say, when I was talking about services, we also have Serve Society come in for haircuts. That has been an amazing transformation, like to just see somebody walk in, and then, I mean, I had a guy walk in and then he came out and I didn't even recognize him. They were like, yeah, that's Chris. And I was like, what? So, I mean, that's amazing. We also have our homeless work program that comes. We run a lottery every Monday, and then on Tuesday they get picked up to go be taken out to work. We pay them cash daily, don't have to have ID. It's very low barrier. What else am I missing? Oh, our resident advisory board. So we've put together an advisory board where the residents get to sit in and they get to give positive or negative feedback, and say, you know, well, this is what I like, well, this is what I don't like, this is what I would want. I mean, obviously, we're not going to be able to do everything they want us to do, but we sure do try. So, yeah.
Thank you. Yeah, I must say, putting together, it takes time to build it, and putting together a real active resident advisory group that actually gives, meaningful input into the operations of the shelter is important and not easy to put together. So it takes time, it takes work, but it sure makes a big difference, to even, like the gentleman you were talking to about life skills and things, things like that, to some of the things that I might think we would be imposing on people, they actually want. So, so it's interesting how that can really change the conversation and the process. Um, I see someone put in the comments, you guys, about asking about clothing and things like that.
Sure. So we do have a lot of clothing donations. We are actually having volunteers come in to sort, and we're going to set up in two of the cubbies that I was showing you guys just a little bit ago. We're going to set up like a little shop where they can come in at, maybe after their orientation, and then they can get some clothing. We are fortunate enough where the ADOH funding has allowed us to purchase, like for Kadeem, he actually went on a pretty important job interview and he needed specific clothing. So we were able to do that. But yes, we do. Every client that comes in gets a hygiene kit. It's like a starter kit. It's what you've seen in the net bags that were in the shelter monitor office. So we do supply hygiene and clothing and shoes to our residents.
Thanks. I also will give a plug for the home fund. So OPCS operates a home fund, and that is where donors put funding into that, and that is able to buy things like clothing and stuff for grants in areas where we don't have that funding, which is usually the case. And so it's a way that donors in the community can put money in and see that return directly to clients and things like clothing. And it doesn't have limitations. It could be that we're paying off fines. It could be clothing. It could be furniture for a new apartment. It could be back rent. It could be anything. So it's nice to have that support and that funding. And I couldn't go a whole hour without putting in a plug for donors to give us more money. The other questions that have come in. So comment from Patrick Moore, appreciate that, about Housing First. And are there cons to housing people who may still be using Yeah, interesting question. So there's cons to everything about people using, that's for sure. And that was one of my questions as we that I know Dee might mention or respond to about shelter. And I think Allison had some real good comments about people in shelter and what it is like when people are still using and how they get better in that process. I don't know, Allison, if you're comfortable kind of talking about your experience.
Absolutely. One of the things that I've observed, both working in shelter for the city of Tucson and Old Pueblo is, yes, absolutely, people do come in that are still actively using. But once people come in and they have some of the basic necessities that you or I might take for granted, being able to shower, use the restroom when we want, their self-worth really kind of tends to improve. It's interesting to see the change and transformation in somebody. You can see, while they might not completely be off substances, right? They're starting to think about that kind of thing, and they're also really lessening the amount that they're using. They're taking pride in their appearance. They're doing the little things that, we do every day, but you have to also understand that people that are coming from homelessness, especially street homelessness, is they're acclimating to living outdoors. Where, if you or I were suddenly homeless, we wouldn't really know how to live outdoors. I would have no idea. It's the same thing. There's a transition period for folks that are coming into shelter, to have to learn the life skills again, the basic things that you or I might not think about daily that we do, or, the comforts that we have in our home. Once you start to provide those type of spaces for people, and those type of, most people that are homeless view them as luxuries, right? It's amazing the transformation that takes place in somebody. And as their self-worth grows, they can address things like Tom said, like their addiction, addressing their mental health needs, their physical health needs. One of the things that I thought was so neat, I noticed Dee's client had him, and it's an idea I stole from Old Pueblo when I came to the city, is, making a badge for the clients to wear. So, staff knows that they're there and they belong there, correct? And so I would have multiple clients come up to me and they didn't like that picture that they took when they first came in, because it reminds them of where they were and their appearance is completely different. And so they're like, please, miss, please, can you redo my badge? I want a new picture. And I think as those little things start to happen and people, start to have self-worth again and see a potential in a future there, it makes it easier to address all those things, in not such a drastic way, right?
So well said. I could never say it that well. So I'm so glad when we talked yesterday, you were mentioning that. Yeah, it's in our experience over the years, as people get better and they have more of a future and they have less to lose, more to lose, they become naturally, more concerned and willing and interested in changing. Really hard to get someone who's living unsheltered in a wash that you need to stop using for your future, and they look at you like things aren't going really well, right? There isn't as much, there isn't that motivation. And so as soon as you start to have things, and often we'll say in our system wide communities will say, oh, well, until you have that, we won't provide you shelter. Well, I'm not going to get that unless I have shelter. So it's this sort of a back and forth. The other thing is that, Patrick, I think that clearly there must be people that we move into apartments that are tenants that are using substances, drinking alcohol. And for some of them, I have to imagine there must be some that doesn't, it's certainly not good for their health, but doesn't cause them problems as a tenant. And so because it doesn't cause them problems as a tenant, we probably don't have a whole lot of interaction around that. But for a lot of the folks we serve, their substance use has gotten to a point to where it's going to probably cause negative consequences. And so for us, then that's just an opportunity. Instead of us trying to force people in it to the beginning, at some point, we mention that it's available, they always know it's there. And then when they're in that tight spot where they've got a problem with their lease, they're going to get discharged, they're going to get evicted or whatnot, we can come in again with that offer to say, hey, maybe you should do something about this, and then we could help you with your back rent, or we could help you with this or that, and you could do better. So most folks, it's a matter of time. It's going to cause a problem. It's just intervening when it's going to be most likely received and acted upon. And then there are people, the other thing that I always tell people is that it's been proven again and again that behavioral health folks are not able to predict outcome well. We're not good predictors. So some of the people that we think, oh, this is not going to work, do fantastic. And some of the people that we think, oh, they've got this all figured out, don't do really well at their first, second, and third try. So instead of predicting, we just kind of follow the path. And in the end, in the housing first model, they just need to be good tenants. They need to be a good neighbor. They need to, and if they could do that while using, there's legal consequences if they get arrested for that. But other than that, certainly people do use substances and live in apartments and not necessarily lose their housing. It reminds me of college days, right? There's certainly it certainly happens. Okay, a couple other questions. Capacity for clients who speak different languages. That's pretty limited. We do have translation services as an outpatient behavioral health clinic. And so everyone has access to that, and we can have medical translators provide that. And so that's definitely available. It gets harder, I think, depending on staff capacity for a common language like Spanish to be able to provide groups and things like that. But if someone really, it's harder, clearly, for someone who speaks zero English to participate in a lot of the activities and group activities. And I'm imagining that some of the folks in that situation have or look for solutions in other places where people do speak that language. Now, the other part of that question was, do we serve refugees? We don't have any, there's got to be requirements. I know there is when it comes to getting into permanent housing, what HUD will allow, depending on your citizen status. And that seems to be changing literally by the minute. And so there are some questions there, but we're low barrier and we're going to accept someone no matter what. It's about keeping people alive. It may be very helpful for them to get to the next place because they might not be eligible for a housing voucher, things like that. So that's the real questionable part. I don't know, Dee, if there's anything else you have to say to that, but
No. Mm-mm.
okay. The other question was medication management as the part of the behavioral health weekly component. Does right now no one comes in for it, right? They go out to get MAT.
Yeah, they go out for MAT services.
Yes, it would be nice to have people come in for MAT services. And I know there's talk with some of the opioid funds that are coming down at maybe someone in the community offering that sort of service and a mobile service, which would be fantastic. But right now they go to the MAT clinic. We allow it. We don't get in between them and their doctor. They certainly can have that. Everyone gets a locked box that they can store medications and their needs. We keep track of it for medical emergencies so we can tell first responders, but we don't make any judgment on what it is they should or shouldn't have or take. I see a comment on Tucson Refugee Ministry. That would be interesting resource. Maybe Dee, if you can actually get that information from there. It seems like they offer classes and other things. And Natalie, support you for the guys at CMS. So yes, Natalie, that would be fantastic if we can get more of those services. All right, we've got about 6 minutes left. I don't know if there's any burning questions, either in chat or just in the old-fashioned speaking way.
The fellow in the video mentioned he'd love to get life training classes. I know that Old Pueblo offers life training classes with some other populations. Would you get him over to those, or would you bring them there, or what do you respond to him?
So our case managers currently do individual life skills with our residents here. I would definitely be interested in bringing some life skill groups here. Like Tom said, this has been a work in progress, and it's just been, just trying to grow it. And so, yes, I would love to have life skill groups here.
Yeah, and I can definitely respond to the groups and why we transport folks that was in the comments. Because they're getting a behavioral health assessment, unless they opt out, no one must. It's part of our process. I'd rather have them have Medicaid and access, and so that they have that if they need it, but they don't have to have it. But most people opt to go ahead with a behavioral health assessment. And so that requires us to be in an outpatient clinic. The same thing with things like life skills groups, stuff like that. So the state of Arizona requires that those services are provided in an appropriate environment of privacy, and so that's why we transport people to the outpatient clinics, either at our park location or we have another clinic at Fifth and Swan. And so that's kind of why. The other thing that we're looking at and trying to do is to get licensure at numerous locations, and so getting licensure at the shelter is certainly a possibility. And then we could provide group services and things like that. We can provide in what are considered in-home services in the shelter, but as soon as you turn something into a group or turn something into a scheduled activity, it becomes a behavioral health service and needs to be in a clinic. But so a lot of technicalities, the world of technicalities. How do we refer people that are needing shelter? That's a good one for D. What's the way to contact you guys?
I was just typing my email address in the chat. Most of our referrals come from our outreach department, so they're people that we find out at the encampments. But you can definitely, I'm going to send my email address in the chat, and you can always reach out to me to see if we have beds available, and then I can send outreach out to the person. We do that quite a bit. So, yeah.
Yeah, you can also call our main number on the website, email, and what's essentially will happen is that will go to D, and D will, whoever you talk to should have the capability of determining eligibility at our front desk.
Mhm.
And if the person meets eligibility, so it's really, designed for people with the highest need, then it's going to go over to D, and she'll have our outreach people talk to them and start the process to see if we can help them get into our shelter or another shelter. One of the things that we're a little bit, think of a traditional shelter like upside down in some ways, because Deidre's more likely to not accept one eligible because they're too able to get services and support somewhere else. So the person who's having mental health, significant mental health difficulties, is using substances and has two dogs, that's, this woman with her two dogs is like our person, right? They'll often be screened out of a shelter where we're going to screen them in. So there are other shelters that have higher requirements, breathalyzer, things like that some people might be a better fit for. And really, and of course, the other thing is that, we need funding in our community. And part of what we're doing, what I'm describing, is really not, it's an issue of funding. If there's enough funding, we need to grow significant our low barrier shelter. And when the funding's available for that, it'll make it a lot easier for us to triage people. But right now, you're really, so few beds, you're trying to really triage people who you think are going to not survive if we don't provide this intervention. Mm,
You have time for one more question?
oh, yes.
I would think that would be a tricky thing to triage in the encampments. People might exceed have their needs that exceed what you can do, like a need for detox or or their health concerns are greater than you can handle. Is it, are the people in the encampments, they have sort of a screening tool that they use to guide
Yes.
them?
Yeah, Dee's team has a screening tool that they use within the encampments that get to some of that. Um, you are right though, and I know you have experience in these areas, Bob, but it's science and art combined, right? Because things change. Um, and a lot of times people are nervous about, right, and rightfully so, about what they tell you. Dee's team does a lot of work to build trust because they're going to be nervous about, if I tell you this, does this get me in or does it not get me in? So sometimes, depending on what someone reported, they still may show up 2 days later looking a lot different. So there's a
Yeah.
combination. It's this flow back and forth. And there are screenings. And so for us, everything starts from that basic screening. So, like for our outpatient, if someone is in what someone might consider crisis, that's outside of our capacity. And we'll call someone else to help with that. And they might not be in crisis today, but they're in crisis 4 days from now. We know that there's a lot of gray area, but that's outside our scope. So we're just not going to we're going to try and help someone be safe and get someone else to come help that is trained and licensed for crisis.
Yeah, thank you very much.
Sure. Thank you. Thank you for joining our board. Bob's one of our newest board members, comes with incredible history and experience. He's going to probably keep me on my toes, but that's okay. Site plans beyond, there is one last question on the firehouse building. There is a plan to build a sprung structure on that property that's already approved. We're trying to figure out some of the funding details with that, but that would up to 100 beds. And then beyond that, I mean, I don't have direct like plans, but I definitely from doing this work recognize that we need some things that I didn't really think we needed or and certainly did not want us to necessarily do, but we're at such a crisis now we have to, which is one, some sort of safe encampments in the community, and two, more shelter, more low barrier shelter. And for that, we probably need a larger structure. One of the things that I think we need to be careful about is not investing, $100 million in a shelter because and instead using as much as we can existing resources because we need that money for permanent housing. We need to be able to get through. Not only do we need to do this, but we also need to try and do it with the least expense possible so that we don't detract from the money for tenant-based subsidies and permanent housing construction. There's a plan that comes for affordable housing out of the Regional Affordable Housing Commission that it will be, which I serve as a commissioner, will probably be recommending to Pima County and the city and everyone else that we need about $1 billion investment in affordable housing. And I'm doing everything I can that sounds like a lot of money, to put that in perspective and remind people that that's not a lot of money. That's really not when you consider what the number of housing that we need. And when you compare it, one of the things that someone told me in business years ago from Social Venture Partners was that if you want to know the true values of a business, look at their budget. And you can say that about government, I think, too, and everyone else. We may say we believe in this or that, but if you look at their budget, how much money is put to it? Um, and I'm not here to downplay anything else because we need it all. I'm not anti-roads, but if roads are the primary concern for the community, that's where their values truly are, and that's what will be funded. If housing is a value, then that's what the voter will require, and that's what will be funded. So it really is the budget really is a values statement. And we have to, as a community, recognize that. And a lot of times I think we're under the impression that nonprofits can get creative, but you can only get so creative. If you've got 8 million and you need 1 billion, you can't get that creative. It's not going to happen. So it really is, funding is a big piece of this. And until we get truly the funding that's needed, we'll always be kind of chasing after things and not really achieving the full goal. So in the end, we need the funding one way or another. All right, I was on my funding. You can go to helptucson.org. You can go to City of Tucson. There are a lot of different volunteer opportunities. Of course, as I always say, we are more than happy as an organization to take money in any way you send it. And we appreciate your support. I'm truly grateful. We know that we will not reach our goal unless we have full community integration and support. And so you taking the time to be here today really says that you're engaged. And if you can always reach out to me, I'm on the website, and you can always call me, and it will go directly to my cell. So I appreciate it. And I think I always have a hard time ending meetings. I'm feeling like this is like 5 minutes over and it's probably the end, right? I don't have any good Oh, a salute. That's about we're in the military. That's how you know. That's how you know the meeting's over. Boom. That's a good one. I like that. Thank you to everyone. Thank you to Jacob and to Monica and to Lindsay and others that are on this call who have been getting me numbers and supporting this all in the background. The people that you don't see in this that are doing lots of weeks of work to make this happen. You guys made it look easy. So thank you very much. We will see you in a month. I appreciate your time.